Hi there, I'm Tressa Haney, and I'm here with Nathaniel Smith, and we are going to be taking questions today, and we're going to wait for some people. So hi, Nat, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
No problem. I think many people from GANS love to watch you and will like to watch you. We don't have anybody watching now, but soon people will start popping on, that's for sure. So we'll do a little idle chit chat until some people show up so that we can, so people don't miss anything. Usually I have my phone, and just give me 1 second.
Okay.
Okay, there I go. I'm going to share it to my personal Facebook page so that people can watch it. And we have one viewer on with us now. So if you're just coming on, please say hi so we know you're here and who you are. And always tell us where you're watching from, because people love to see how far the reach is in genealogy, because we're everywhere looking back to where we came from. Where are you, Nat? You can start off by saying where you're watching from.
Well, I'm in Edmonton, Alberta, where I live and work. But my heart and soul and work, or genealogical work, are always in Halifax and Prospect. So
yeah, oddly enough, I'm in Ottawa, and my genealogy is always back in Prospect too. So just full disclaimer, Nat and I are actually cousins.
Yes, we are. We share our grandparents, our brother and sister.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So we are second cousins, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have Mudu Mudu put something in a language I don't know. So hello, if that's what that means. Thank you for watching. And so again, people just come on and say hi. We're getting a few viewers on there. So send some hearts and that kind of stuff. So I'm just going to put it's Prospect Village.
.ca. Yeah.
I'm going to show that. So here we go. So we have a few people on viewing. Please say hi. Tell us where you're from. Send us some hearts so we know you're there. We're not just talking to each other, although we've already spent the last 10 minutes or so chit-chatting.
That's right.
So, Nat,
yes.
I said that we're cousins, but you have this website for Prospect, and I actually don't know, because probably when you were creating this, I was busy with my little kids because I was in my 20s. And so I don't really know how you got started making this website, but I do know that you really, you were the village sweetheart for having this website about every family. So you can start by telling us how you got started doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I remember actually going back. I have my, it was my first time to the archives. You can see my little archives here. But my grandmother, Kathleen Coolin, she wanted to know about her great-great-great-grandfather, Peter Doherty. Doherty was her maiden name. And so I said to her, well, I'm interested in that. So why don't we go to the archives? And so she's like, yeah, okay, we'll do that. So we went down one Saturday, and my mom was there, Linda. And we started searching for a bit, and we eventually found, through the church records at Prospect, we eventually found some names that were familiar to my grandmother. But ultimately, they got a little hungry and bored. So I said, I was 15 at the time. And I said, well, can I stay here for the rest of the day? It's me and a bunch of microfilm machines. And
that's pretty nerdy.
I know. I know. The internet had just come out, so everybody was on the internet, and here I am in a microfilm room. And anyway, they went and had lunch and did some shopping downtown, and I spent the rest of the day on the microfilm machines. And that was really the spark that led to the creation of the website. More or less a month or so later, as I said, the internet was new, so I was teaching myself how to do website design, as a eager 15-year-old. And so I first went to a place called Free Pages on Roots Web, which is a website that doesn't exist anymore, and created the website there. They had some templates, so I was able to use those. And really, it was just like a bunch of text and a few photos that my grandmother had that I was able to scan into the computer. So immediately people were like, I want to know more information. So, I'm from Massachusetts, or I'm from New York, or I'm from Maine and Ontario. And I had this one lady who she was from Japan. She lived in Japan. She grew up in Japan, but her ancestors were from Saul's Island in Prospect.
Really?
And it just blew my mind. And that was all because of the internet. And so I just methodically went through the archives and started transcribing census records, church records, anything I could get my hands on that said Prospect, and then putting it online, and it turned into what it is today. I was really lucky too, because at the time there was a gentleman in the village called Doug Grant. I don't know if you remember Doug Grant at all. Yeah. So Doug, my late grandfather Weldon was kind of grumpy, I guess, but he really liked Doug Grant. So Doug would come and sit down, and they would kind of just chat about things. And Doug was always good at kind of like asking questions. And so I remember I was visiting the house one day, and Doug was there, and we started talking, and he's like, oh, well, you're interested in the history. And I was like, sure, so am I. And he's like, well, I'm absolutely interested in the history. And he mentioned the website, and he started working with me on that. And he really became a bit of a mentor for me over those years. And unfortunately, he passed away in 2003 suddenly. But we had great plans. We were going to write a comprehensive history of the village, and I was going to do genealogy. He was going to do the history side. But the website is really kind of a memorial to him in that regards, because a lot of the early work I wouldn't have been able to do it without him. So
yeah, he was a really great guy for me in many ways too, because I was working in the community quite a bit as well. So yeah, so
PPRA.
Doug, if he's watching from above, yeah. So we have Janet from Kelowna. Hi, Janet. Thanks for watching. I just want to shout out to Sherry Gray. Sherry likes to watch us quite a bit, so thank you for watching. This is Nathaniel Smith, and he's talking about the Prospect Village website that he created back when he was like 15, 16, 17, right when the internet started.
Yeah. Really. It was actually really funny because it was there wasn't a lot of, like today, a lot of people, their entire genealogical research is based on what they find online. But in 1998, there was nothing, absolutely nothing. Like it was a virgin territory of the internet. And so I think I was lucky in the sense that I was in the right place at the right time. Yeah. And the website really was, the community in Prospect is so tight anyway. And people have a very strong sense of belonging, even though they may never have lived there. And so I was really lucky because those two things came together, and the website kind of was the conduit for that. So I've been able to meet people from all over the world and make friends and family, and kind of, I call it the Prospect diaspora, because, the village used to have 1,000 people living in it in the middle of 19th century. And all of those people had children. So when they moved away, their children grew up in mostly, the United States and Upper Canada, but all over the world. So the net is quite large, I guess.
It's so crazy, isn't it? So how many people, like just for my own question, but if 1,000 people lived there, so say when you were a kid in 1998, how many people do you think lived there?
Oh, less than 200. Right. Like I'd say maybe.
So that's crazy.
Yeah, the population disappeared, and the village that's there today is, small, but think about it times 2, with that number of houses and all those things. So yeah.
So so again, if you're just popping on, because I see a lot of people are coming and going and that kind of thing, let us know who you are, say hi, and where you're watching from, because we love to see. And if you have any questions for Nathaniel, he is a certified genealogist. Yep. So he has that going for him, not just the website. So make sure you pop your questions in there, and he'll do his best to answer them. So as the website got going, I remember as a young person, like watching it, it was very exciting, You get to see like your family coming together online and all these weird pictures of places that I've been and swam from and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. So that's pretty cool. How did it progress on to become more than a Roots Web website and more of life's work for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. So like I said, Doug, like really, well, there was a number of people that came in and went. My cousin Barry, who you know, Barry Coolin, he went to computer science for university, and he was like, you know, your website's looking a little tired. And I was like, this was in like 2003. You know, the internet was so old. So he's like, you know, the website's looking a little tired. And I was like, well, do you want to help me pull it together? And he said, yeah, I'd love to do that. So we sat down and we redesigned the website, and we finally secured the URL prospectvillage.ca. And I think in securing that URL really early, we were able to kind of point people who were looking for information about Prospect, both as a place to go today to visit, but people who were from the place as a kind of like a focal point for them to go to. So very often our website is the first thing that pops up in Google, or one of the first things that pops up in Google when you search for Prospect. So that has driven a lot of traffic to the website. Oh, hi, Sherry.
I can't see the comments now. I can see them and I'm popping them up but I can't see them on the screen for some reason. I don't know what I did. But
Sherry's one of the few people that actually really early on. I had a summer contract, I think, in 2002 in Terrence Bay, working with Barb Allen and the folks at the Resource Center there,
right.
To kind of go around and record the stories of all the older people. And Terrence Bay at the time, I think there was like 25 people in their 90s.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. Your Ryan ancestors come from Lower Prospect and Terrence Bay, so
we're probably cousins.
Yeah, they probably were. So that summer, I remember Sherry was very integral to the work that we were doing down there of interviewing people. So that was really exciting. Anyway, I don't know what I was talking about. All the memories.
Barry helping you get your tired website into the new tired look.
In 2008, we celebrated 10 years and we relaunched the website, and we held a little event down at the church hall in Prospect where we kind of unveiled the new look of the website. And, you know, it was like a Thursday night or something, and 25 people showed up. But it was one of those things where we were able to go through all of the photos, and people were sitting in the chairs and they were going, oh, well, that's so-and-so and that's so-and-so. And, oh, I remember that. And it was really, really exciting. And I really think the website has really connected people who, you know, it's funny, in a small village, surprisingly, sometimes people can live there for a very long time and not talk to each other.
Yeah.
And the village is broken up into various sections. So if you're not one to go and just walk around, you don't see people who live in different parts of the village. So the website really brought people together in that way. And so that was kind of exciting.
And they closed the church. So that changed the dynamic too.
Well, yeah. So in 2014, they officially closed the church down, and that really killed kind of the central community hub that existed for the last 200 years in the village. So I've seen a lot of people who come to the website asking questions about the church.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of now acted as that kind of information flow about, like, well, what's happening? Has anybody bought it? You know, what's happening to preserve the stained glass windows? That's a really important thing for people, because
one of them has my name on them. Thank you.
Well, that's right. Yeah.
Thank you to my husband.
They were donated by families, and so you know, they mean something to people. And
so tell me what is happening to them then. Do you know?
Well, I actually don't know.
Anybody knows what the Catholic Church is doing stained glass windows in all the churches that they've shut down? Let us.
Yeah, well, and if whoever buys this church is going to have a lot of Kylies looking at them, because like I think 3 of the windows were bought by the Kylie family.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So yeah, that's how the website evolved, and then the last couple of years we've been migrating over to a new format, and I finally got all of the old content moved over. It's taken me a long time. You know, I went from being a 15-year-old in high school to someone in their 20s with a career. And I don't have kids, but I've been busy. So trying to manage the website.
Hobby, which could be a full-time job, managing a website.
Well, yeah, I try to answer emails as quickly as possible. So it's taken me some time to migrate the content over, but we actually have, I have about 150 new photos that have been scanned in over the last 5 or 6 years that I've been meaning to put online. So that is something that I hope to do before November, because in November we'll be celebrating the 20th anniversary.
20 years, holy.
Yeah.
Can you see the comments? I'm putting them up, but I cannot see them on my screen. Can you see?
I have James.
James?
Well, I'm not sure if it's Meyer or Mar. And back home in Prospect, we would pronounce it Mar. But I think in other places they pronounce it Meyer.
Okay.
But he said he's from Maryland.
I mean, I can see the actual comments because I'm putting them on the screen, but I see them up on my screen. So also a little heart from Nicola, if you know her. I don't know.
Yeah, I happen to know my sister.
Got Nicola Smith. I don't know if you know her, and Wayne Gilly from Gutsboro. Thanks for watching. And yeah, from New Harbor, Guysboro. So if anybody has any questions, please post them for Nathaniel, because he might be able to answer them. I mean, we're talking, because we're cousins, we're talking about Prospect Village, and also Nathaniel started the website prospectvillage.ca as a hobby, well, actually at the request of his grandmother, looking for information. So tell me, did you ever find the person your grandmother wanted to know about?
Yeah, Peter Doherty actually has a really fascinating story. He shows up in Prospect in 1824 at the age of 11 with no parents. It looks like, and then, subsequent to that, sorry, I'm going to interrupt because I'm seeing the comments.
James also says that he spoke to you before.
That's right. That's right. I do remember that now that you say the Saul name. So Peter Doherty, it was really interesting because we didn't know where he came from. And then through digging and digging and digging, we found out that he was actually born in Chester. He was an illegitimate birth. His parents weren't married. And he was, in fact, originally baptized with the surname Green. But, we believe he's still a Doherty.
Controversy in your family tree, is that what you're saying?
1815, controversy, soap opera in Chester. Yeah. So anyway, that has led to meeting all kinds of Doherty cousins all over the world.
Isn't that great?
My aunt Jovita still lives in the same home as the Doherty family, the one that Peter built in 1860 in Prospect. So we have a very long history with the family in the village. Really cool.
Really cool. Yeah. So if there's any Dohertys out there, or anybody from a Doherty family, or maybe from Green family way back in Chester, we know where your guy went if you can't find him in the census anymore. He got adopted or something, or changed his name. So James Marr saying that he's looking for any souls buried in Prospect.
Yeah, it's hard. The Saul family was very prominent in Prospect in the early part of the history of the village, like in the 1800 to about 1850. Mm-hmm. And though a number of them stayed in the village for up until the present day, there are relatives of the family that live in the village. The Saul surname kind of disappears around 1900 in any kind of like number of people with the surname. And they, James Marr's family clearly, they moved to the United States. And
sorry.
Sorry.
I said, sorry, James.
Yeah.
But I'd like to know that you have an island named after you. So
yeah, that's true.
For you in there, touched it.
If you ever come to Prospect to visit, James, there will be multiple people who would love to chat with you.
Yeah. So I'm going to take that. Actually, James comes in. There's people to talk to. That's for sure. So let's take that into the story that I was telling you about this summer.
Yes.
Where I go to a big party in Prospect Village because I'm home visiting, and there's a guy there, and he's telling me about meeting you 20 years ago, and he's back visiting his people. So you know more about that than I even do. So why don't you go for it?
Yeah, it's really funny. So I was the gentleman's name is Tim Miller. He's from Massachusetts, and he it was really funny because we had been communicating, but at the time in 1998 or 1999, I didn't know he was visiting Halifax. But I was at the archives, and I always kind of sat at the table with my ear perked up to see if anybody would come to the reference desk and kind of ask a question about prospect.
Did I just hear you say coolin'?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So he came in and he started talking and saying, well, my family's last name is Mullins, and they're from Prospect. So I immediately perked up and was like, oh, hi, and introduced myself, and I was 15 or 16 years old. And then within a matter of an hour or two, we were in his car driving down to Prospect. But today I'm driving in cars with strangers is like always a good thing to do. But so we immediately drove down to the village and met my grandmother, and then of course talked about the Mullins family, and we went out and up the shore. His family, the Mullins, actually had built their house up the shore by High Head, at the top of that. When you go up the Indian Point Road and you cross the brook into the High Head area, immediately across the brook there's a foundation hole, and then all along that stretch of land there, through the brook, the mouth of the brook there are 2 or 3 other foundation holes, and that's where the Mullins live.
Yeah.
And so we were able to go there and kind of bushwhack the high grass down and find the cellar holes. And so for Tim, I guess, in talking to him subsequently to that over the last number of years, allowed him to connect with the village, because his family actually left Prospect in the 1870s. And so his direct connection to the village is quite old, but they always spoke about the village. So for him coming back, it means a lot. And then, for him to come back 20 years later and still be able to walk there as if he was there only yesterday, and to know people and to get to talk to people like Tressa, like,
oh yeah. And he was at a party. Like he had lived in the village his whole life.
Right.
He was a part of us, and we welcomed him, and he was quite happy. So it was really fun, actually. He had a big camper that he had parked on someone's property, like right in there like a dirty shirt. So it was really great. And he did go over to GANS, which is the Genealogical Association of Nova Scotia, for all people watching on their Facebook page, by the way. Yeah. And so we went there and did some research and stuff like that. So he feels really connected to the East Coast of Canada, Prospect in particular.
It's interesting too, because his experience in life, he was in the military. I believe he's a Vietnam veteran. And then, he subsequently moved to Cape Cod in Massachusetts, which is not unlike Nova Scotia. But, when you're from a place and your ancestors are from that place, it changes how you feel about it. So,
there's some ownership there, I think.
Totally.
James is, if you're still watching, James is going to come and visit next summer. So that's good. So please go into GANS. And since you're coming from away, you should make sure that you contact them first, and they'll help get some things together. And also people should know that if you're a member of GANS, you get a little bit of special privilege, because they will spend a little more time helping the members out, and other members help each other out. So it's about $39, I think, for a membership. It's super cheap. Go on the website where it says renew or join us, and you can either pay online or send a check in the snail mail. And and it's just, a robust membership helps everybody. So so I just want to mention that too. We also,
I'll say too, Tressa, like, if I hadn't joined GANS when I did, I wouldn't have been able to make some of the connections that I made in terms of both my friends group of people who are involved in the genealogical community, but the resources that they bring to the table. And so, the $39 is worth its weight. So in gold, very valuable resource, and they're more than happy to answer your question, or at least point you in the right direction as best they can. So.
Well, I never met a more interesting group to talk to, because they can tell you stories about the stories are incredible. So it's really cool. So connect with GANS. Yeah, I mean, if you're asking that as a question, I really think so. If you email them a couple weeks before you come, they will, and tell them what you're specifically looking for. They will, you know, especially if you're a member, they will spend it, because they're not researchers, by the way. It's a resource library. So, but they will dig in the library and find things that might go with what you're looking for, so that you're not starting from scratch on your vacation, you know, so you have some headway already. So yeah, definitely connect with them. And that would be great. And Heather Slonlight, hi Heather, thanks for watching. So it's nice to see people in. I assume Heather probably has a connection to Terrence Bay or Lower Prospect or Prospect Village. Not this.
Yeah, there's a fair amount of crossover between the two. A lot of times I get questions of like, are the Coolins in Lower Prospect the same as the Coolins in Upper Prospect? And it may not be an obvious answer to some people, but I mean, they fundamentally are the same group of people. But they were separated so early on in their settlement in the area that the families grew up very separate, even though they're, what, I don't know, 10 kilometers away by water. So it's really interesting how the families in Terrence Bay, Lower Prospect, and Upper Prospect, Shad Bay, Whites Lake, how the whole Prospect area, you know, are interrelated with each other.
Yeah.
And that's basically what I've spent the last 20 years kind of piecing together, one person at a time.
Tentacles of Slumlights and Ryans and Coolins.
Yeah, like the Kylies are actually, when they originally settled in the area, they settled in Bayside and up in you know, Eastover area, and then eventually came down into the village, which a lot of the families in the area would have done because the good fishing was in Shad Bay, so you know, that's where they went.
Right.
So
it's all survival based. Yeah. Yeah. So he wants to know if the Saul family, when the Saul family came to Canada, and did they come from Ireland or another country? Do you have?
Well, actually, that's a good question. So a lot of the Irish families, I mean, they were definitely of Irish origin. Whether they came directly to Nova Scotia and Prospect from Ireland is always a question mark, because a lot of these families came in the 1780s, 1790s, which is very early. So they're not famine Irish, which was in the 1840s, which a lot of American Irish find that they descend from. These were predominantly Irish fishermen who would have found their way over here via Newfoundland. And so, for example, the Mullins family, which we were just talking about, likely came to Nova Scotia in the 1760s through Newfoundland. The Coolins came to Halifax in the 1760s through Newfoundland. All the Power families in the Prospect area came to Halifax through Newfoundland. So it wouldn't surprise me that the Sauls also followed that route. The fishing in Newfoundland in the late 1700s was very robust, and so there was a reason for them to be here. But then, you know, the climate was not as hospitable in Newfoundland as it would have been in Prospect. So there's that. The Saul family is really interesting because they intermarried with the Tobin family, and the Tobins were very prominent Irish Catholics in Halifax. And so there's a fair amount of crossover, which makes me think that they probably were in some way, shape, or form connected prior to their arrival in Nova Scotia. So yeah, it's a really good question.
Cool. But that's interesting. Yeah. That they probably may have known each other or had, you know, in different places, even in Newfoundland. So James is from Maryland. So I don't know if you know James, but Newfoundland is like the easternmost part of Canada. So that would be the first spot you would hit if you were crossing the Atlantic, and probably need supplies and get off a boat.
And actually, quite honestly, it was labor was the driving force. So a lot of the fishing outports in Newfoundland just needed people to work, and so people would go and work. But then when they eventually established families, and you know there was nothing to do, they would just move on and come to Canada. Another interesting thing, now this is something I'm exploring as part of the research I'm doing on the Coolin family. So in 1762, William Coolin and his family, his brothers, his sisters, and his mom and dad, came to Halifax from Newfoundland. This is documented in a whole bunch of places. And So that's how we know that they came from Newfoundland. But the question is, why would they come in 1762? Well, interestingly, I find out that in the summer of 1762, the French invaded Newfoundland as part of the French, the war that was happening at the time, and they occupied the island. And in doing so, they basically said to all of the Irish fishermen in and around St. John's, you can either stay or you can leave. So I'm hypothesizing that one of the drivers for them leaving in the year 1762 is that there was conflict, and they were basically making a choice whether to stay under French rule or English rule. Now, if they had stayed just a few months, the English took back the island. So, you know, we would have been arguably Newfoundlanders. So, yeah.
Which would have been better. They're pretty cool people.
Yeah, they are.
So, yeah, so James says that the Mars were sailmakers. Yeah, so, and also, Sherry comments that Heather's her sister. So I was right in that, like, Slumite came from Newfoundland.
Yeah, there you go.
How did I know? So let's move on to something else. So again, I see there's like 10 people watching. So thank you, James, for all your comments and questions, and keep it up for sure. But anybody else that has anything to add or question or ask anything, please do let us know where you're watching from and who you are. Send us a heart, let us know, so we don't feel like we're just talking into the atmosphere here. So let's talk about GANS and how you became involved with that organization.
Yeah, so I started getting involved with GANS probably after I graduated from university. You know, I was working, I had some extra time on my hands. I wasn't, being a university student anymore. So I was looking for something to do, and so I started going to their lectures. At the time, they used to hold the lectures at the Nova Scotia Archives on the weekends. So I would go to the archives and do some research, and then visit the lecture, and then go back upstairs. So through that, I met the folks that were organizing it. Alan Marble at the time, Dr. Marble, Pam Weil, Jan. I can't think of who else was there at the time. Yeah, it was really a tight-knit group of people, and they just like to talk about genealogy. And so I decided to put my name forward for a vacant executive position. And in 2010, I think, I was appointed the secretary and recorder. So it was a good entry-level position in the organization to see how it worked. GANS at the time was going through a bit of a transition because, as most genealogical associations, the model that they were built on in the 80s, which was based primarily on going through and indexing stuff and publishing stuff, was changing because the internet by then had basically started to put, quote unquote, everything online. So they were it was interesting to be in GANS at that time because we were starting to see the shift from the hard paper copy stuff, like their lovely collection of birth, deaths, and deaths, burials, and probate records, which Alan Marble indexed. This is a 4-volume index of every person who died in Nova Scotia between 1800 and 1850. So, and you can buy these online. So this is the type of stuff that they were doing. Like you can see, like every page here has, 50 or 60.
Because the internet is going strong, obviously. Those resources are not obsolete, I don't think, because I spent the whole summer going through, like we looked at a lot of different books and stuff like that. I mean, it's fun. If you're into it, it's fun to sit down with those books and just look through stuff. I think we should do a whole chat about the way people died and how it was recorded in a census.
Yes, absolutely. And
the cause of death for so many people was so strange and funny, teething and stuff like that. Anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just wanted to.
You're absolutely right. Like, and it's resources like this that GANS was publishing in the, from when it was started in 1982 until around, I think the last set of publications would have been the Index of Marriages in Nova Scotia that goes up to the 1840s. So it's every marriage that was documented in a church record in Nova Scotia, in every community, and it's in a book. And again, it's multi-volume because it's so large. But
Right.
those resources don't exist in a digital format because it would be impossible to do that right now. So, you know, GANS is really important to me because it allowed me to be involved in a community of people who actively engaged in genealogy on a day-to-day basis. But it also opened up the world to me in terms of the types of resources that were available. And it was because of that involvement that I decided finally to become a certified genealogist through the Genealogical Institute of the Maritimes. And that was a big milestone for me in 2014 because it would have been 12 years after I started doing this work with Prospect.
Yeah. James, I can't write on the screen right now. He asks what's a good way to contact. So I'm actually going to let you talk about researching, and we have some links that we're going to put in there. There's also info at I think it's Nova Scotia
Ancestors. Yeah.
.ca. I never know if it's NS, but it's info at novascotiaancestors.ca is the email to the Genealogy Association. Also, they have a great website with all of their information, which is novascotiaancestors.ca. But I'll put those links in after we're done the broadcast. And Nathaniel actually has a list of, and I'll let you talk about that actually.
Yeah. I'll notice, I see on the screen here that Iris Shea has joined us, and she's a little heart has popped up there. Iris is one of those people that in my early teens I met again at like a lecture, and who has really, she doesn't know this, I'm going to say this, I'll embarrass her, but has acted as a bit of a mentor through my genealogical career, because she never said, oh, well, you're just a 16-year-old. She always treated me as an equal. And again, like I always felt welcomed. I never felt like I was being annoying to anybody, even though I'm sure I was. And so these are the people who, through GANS and through the various other historical groups that I belong to, have become friends in my adult life. So I think organizations like GANS are really important for building that connection. It's not a connection that exists today online. Like people don't belong to, I shouldn't say they don't, but it's harder to belong to and connect to a group of people like you would if you were going to the regular lectures at GANS or interacting with them through their website and going to their library and stuff like that.
Yeah, and so part of I think what we were doing this summer with Facebook Lives is to just really provide some information about that, because it became this, it's almost like a little bit of a bridging tool between the old way things were done and people were connecting together, and to let people know what GANS has available for them in their research, because there are real people, volunteers in the background that if you're a member, they will look things up for you or try to help you. But then Nathaniel also has a list, and we'll post the link of researchers that you can, and they're for hire. Yeah. So it's this is their life's work, but you don't do research for other people, or?
Not at the moment, mostly just because I'm physically not able to access the resources that I would normally in the course of a research project, just because I'm physically in Alberta. So I wouldn't be able to provide a comprehensive response to somebody asking a question. Because I go home as much as I can, but I don't know if you've flown across the country lately, but it's not cheap. No. So that being said, I'm focusing right now on my own projects. I've been working for the last, since I moved to Alberta in 2015, I've been kind of huddled away at night working on a comprehensive genealogy of the Coolin surname in Nova Scotia. And so that's my main focus. I'm hoping to publish that in the next little while. And then, in the future, if I ever move back to Nova Scotia, I would definitely take clients, but at the moment I'm not.
Yeah. I'm just going to shout out to a few people that are on here. I want to thank people for coming. James, Susan Coolin. Maybe she's a relation, don't know. Virginia Haley and Iris Shea and just going through the little things that I can see there. So thank you guys for watching. It's really fun to have you all here. I'm Tressa Haney, and I'm with Nathaniel Smith. So let's move on to talk about Terry Punch.
Yeah.
We're 36 minutes into it. I think I could sit here all afternoon, but we'll lose the interest of people soon. Hi, Caroline Judd. Caroline Judd, maybe? Sorry, Caroline. Thank you for watching. Yeah, so if you could just start by talking about Terry Punch and maybe explain to people that don't know who he is.
Yeah, well, I mean, anyone growing up in Nova Scotia who, you know, whose family listened to CBC radio at noon would know the voice of Terry Punch. He did a regular.
Sorry, I know you're Chris's wife. I just wanted to.
I know. We know who you are.
I'm Lynn's daughter, and that's Lynn's son.
But the interesting thing is that so he did that radio show for many years. But he was very important to establishing both the genealogical committee of the Nova Scotia Historical Society in the 1970s, which at the time existed underneath the Historical Association. And then in 1982 being a signatory to the founding of the Genealogical Association, along with Dr. Marble and a number of other people. And so he's played a very important role in establishing the community of genealogists in Nova Scotia. And then, of course, his writing is probably his legacy, because he the most famous, I guess, book of his would be the Genealogical Research in Nova Scotia. I think the last edition of this was published in 1997 by Nimbus Publishing, but prior to that, he had published this in the 1980s, I believe. And so it's a little out of date now because it's almost 20 years old, or it's over 20 years old. But it's a really good, strong foundation for anybody who's interested in genealogy, who wants to understand where records are, and what types of records are available. And in my early days, this was my Bible. I bought this. This is the copy I bought in 1998, and you know, I've gone through and written in it and memorized it. And when I was doing my certification, I used this as my training document. So it was one of those things where Terry kind of existed in my life, whether he knew it or not, at all stages of my career. And he was just a really nice guy too. Like he was probably the most famous person in the genealogical world in Nova Scotia, and everybody wanted his time, but he always made sure to make you feel like he was listening and spending time with you, no matter how many people were lined up behind you to talk to him. Yeah. So yeah, that was the great thing about him. Of course, he passed away a year or so ago, and I think Pam can correct me if she's watching, but I believe he made a very significant donation to the GANS library, which they're still working their way through, because over the 40 or 50 years of his research, he collected a fair number of books. And he also was the book reviewer for the Nova Scotia Genealogist newsletter from GANS. And so it accumulated a fair-sized library, which he subsequently has donated. So, which is really important, and why people should go to GANS and visit their library, because the types of resources that are there is quite significant.
Yeah. So again, you can become a member of GANS for $39 a year. You can go on their website, novascotiaancestors.ca, and I'll post all those links after we're done, and go to the renew or join us or join me or something like that. And it's fairly easy to become a member, and it's super cheap. And a robust membership means that everybody wins because everybody's research gets connected. Also, their office is open from Tuesday to Thursday from 9:30 to 3:30, and it's at 33 Ochterlony Street in Dartmouth. So they have a nice little office there, and there's coffee pots on. There's nice big tables that you can sit down and do your research at. Also, they're open some Sundays, but you should check their website, because that's it's not a regular thing. It's just by whenever they decide that they're opening, but it's always listed. So it's novascotiaancestors.ca. So let's talk about the letter. You said Terry had time for everybody.
Yeah.
So show us the letter.
Well, okay, so like I was just saying that I'm the last 5 years I've been working on this what I'm hoping will be the definitive genealogy on the Coolin family. And I've been lucky over the years to have had the advice of a number of people who have been researching the family. So in 2002, by the looks of it, on the letter here, or maybe in 2001, because he may have responded in 2002, but I wrote him a letter with a question I had where I had outlined how I had a theory that all of the Coolin families in Nova Scotia, the Prospect, Shad Bay, Lower Prospect, and then the Coolins that are in Hubbards and Fox Point, how they were all related and how I thought they were related to each other. Which at the time, there was kind of two schools of thought. There was that they weren't related to each other. They just happened to have similar surnames, or they were. So I was firmly in the camp of they were, and I still believe that. And I'll tell you why, but you'll have to buy my book.
Soon to a chapters near you.
That's right. So I wrote Terry this letter and kind of, outlined my theory, and was not expecting a response. But instead, he wrote me back this letter. You can see it's on his official, I can get there really close there, his official letterhead, with all of his designations and whatnot. And he says, thank you for your interesting letter and article. I recall meeting you at the Captain William Spry Library, which would have been at a lecture for the Mainland South Heritage Society. And you sounded like you knew what you were talking about then. And from your letter, I can see that you do. And then
like a celebrity response, was it for you?
Yeah, totally. I was like, oh my God.
It's like writing the government and they wrote you back or something.
Yeah. So it was really great because not only did he respond to me and kind of validate what I was thinking, but he also spent the time to outline in writing what he thought was the areas I made mistakes in. So he drew this chart and he kind of confirmed what I believed to be true based on what I had found. And then he filled in, you can't really see it, but there's like little red pen marks where he kind of put his thoughts into what I had done. So anyway, for a 20-year-old kid, that was pretty exciting to receive a letter from Terry, which further reinforces what I said, is that this is a substantive amount of time for somebody who is very busy to sit down and draw out a chart and go through all of their records and to respond so thoroughly when they didn't have to. So that meant a lot to me.
There's also I have a theory about that. And that you keep talking about how everybody's so nice to you and treats you like an equal. But I think there's a theory of like, you're having a young person that's so interested in something like that is really worth nurturing. And, we see a lot of like, where's your heritage? Go on ancestry.ca or whatever and buy your DNA kit and find out if you're part Irish or whatever, like a lot of that stuff. But it really doesn't take the space of actual physical documents. And
yeah, that's really important.
Yeah. And so I think it kind of makes people lazy. And then there's not a lot of I'm not calling anyone lazy. Don't get me wrong. Don't put your thumbs away. But like, I just mean in terms of like having younger blood coming into this sort of space and researching and putting things in and that kind of stuff too. So I think that's a very valid point. So if kids are interested, or even young people in their 20s and stuff like that, in genealogy, taking them as an elder to a place like GANS just to sit down and look at their family tree a little bit, if you're in the Halifax area, then, that's a gift, I think, for kids and even just young people in general, not kids per se, but
well, it's interesting you say that. The Alberta Genealogical Society, which now that I live here, I'm a member, and I have a friend here who's also from Halifax, oddly enough, who we go to lectures together every so often. But they just published the last 2 issues of their newsletter were all entirely written by students of elementary in elementary school about their family heritage. So it's a good way to connect kids through a project to the world of genealogy, and I'll show them that what they wrote is meaningful to people because their research was obviously at the level of an elementary school child, but it was definitely interesting to read. So yeah, I everything you just said makes perfect sense to me.
Well, and that exercise would give those kids ownership of being a part of that organization too. So it's not just for other people to read, but then they think, oh, I wrote something in a newsletter there once. I should go and check it out. Yeah. So
about Terry's letter is that at the time I was living obviously at home with my parents in Fairview, and he lived in Chocolate Lake. And so at the end of the letter, he says, I just live around the corner in Chocolate Lake. I'm in the phone book. Give me a call. And I'm now kicking myself because I never took him up on that offer.
I'm surprised. I mean, you got in the car with the guy who went down to Prospect.
No, I know.
You just over to Terry's house as a young man.
Yeah.
A genealogical nerd.
Yeah, I know.
I say that in a kind way because it's really, I mean, your research, I mean, let's face it, you're kind of akin to Terry at this point where your research has 20 years of robust research, and you're a young person and you have many years to go, and you're giving time to me today and the Genealogical Association to spread that word too. So that's really cool. I think you've maybe taken a few pages of Terry's book.
Maybe
that kind of thing. Yeah, no pun intended. So Terry has passed away.
Yes.
And he did make a significant donation to GANS, and I think that they're not quite going through and cataloging, and it's not ready to be presented yet or anything like that, but they are going to honor him.
Yes.
It's October, which is just next month, not too far away from now, and that would be on the 23rd of October at the Central Library in Halifax at 6:30 p.m. It's free. They have a speaker called Dr. Bruce Elliott. He's coming from my neck of the woods in Ottawa. And did you ever meet Terry? Like he invited you to? Oh, you did. Okay. So you didn't never meet, like that was your one moment to go to his house?
No.
Okay.
Actually, in 2012, GANS celebrated its 30th anniversary, and we organized this cross-provincial bus tour where we had 2 full tour buses of people who got on the bus at the archives, and we drove them to all these historical museums and places throughout Nova Scotia through the day, and then we ended our at a lecture and dinner at Pictou Lodge, and then yeah, it was a really fun thing. I mean, but I had the privilege of in between each of the stops, we had organized somebody to speak about some form of research to the people on the bus, so they weren't just looking out the window at the scenery, that it was a kind of an interactive thing. And I had the pleasure of being on the bus with Terry and kind of switch hitting between he and I between stops and kind of talking about the different aspects of genealogical research in Nova Scotia. And I think at the time I was really interested in where surnames came from, so I spoke about that, and he of course was a wealth of knowledge, and he took questions, which was fun to watch him at the front of the bus, with a microphone taking questions. So yeah, it was I had a number of opportunities to work with him, and it's unfortunate that he's gone, but his legacy lives on in the work that GANS is doing today, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, Terry is a founding member actually of GANS. So so that's really cool. So as a certified genealogist, you're doing research. If you had to give people advice, what's the one thing that you want to know? It's maybe I'm not asking that good. If you had Okay, so I'm thinking in terms of family files. So at GANS, you can make a family file. So any research or any information you have in your family, you can actually submit it. You can email it and that kind of thing, or make a family file yourself there so that if somebody comes along, they can look in the file folder and they can say, oh my gosh, like my grandmother was married to that guy and they're looking for whoever the wife is or whatever. So in terms of information, what's the hardest thing for you to figure out and find out? And if people could contribute that to the resource library in any way, or are there a group of people that are underrepresented in, you know, in terms of research?
Yeah, good question. You know, it's really funny because I kind of struggle with that question. Even in the work I'm doing right now on the Coolin family, I obviously have knowledge about all of the people who I grew up with. So when they were born, the people who live in the village today, their children, their grandchildren, and so on and so forth. So finding information about people who are alive today is, in that regard, is really easy. But then there's the branches of the family that I don't have any connection with. And so having a way, either through GAN's membership list or through their family files or through an online chat forum or some form of communication online, of connecting with people, is really important, because it actually has allowed me to kind of make connections that aren't obvious in the documents that I'm working with. So that to me has been a really important thing of connecting the people who are living today with the people from the past, because it's not always a straight line.
Yeah.
And so and you know, with people moving array, like it's amazing really with the power of the databases that are online right now. You can plug a name in to ancestry.com, for example, and 10,000 records show up. So I think if I would give advice to somebody who's starting off, is you have to be very discriminatory towards what you're looking at, because you get a lot of garbage in terms of the responses to your questions on websites like ancestry.com. There are 1,000 James Dohertys, and they all lived at the same time. They can't possibly all be the same person. So you have to be able to discern whether the record you're looking at is a record that is for the person that you're looking for, or it's somebody else. And that takes experience. So I find a lot of people, they get frustrated because they're like, well, I can't find anything. And it's just because they actually are getting overwhelmed by the amount of information that's coming to them. And so, yeah, so those are probably the two things, is that, you know, be discerning, be discriminatory, always question the validity of the information that's being presented to you. I think also important is probably understanding the difference between a primary and a secondary record. You know, that's part of our training as certified genealogists, is because a primary record is a record that's created at the time that the event happened, or in close vicinity to the event. And then a secondary record is like a book where somebody describes something, you know, 25 years later. And so how do you compare those two pieces of information together, and how do you prioritize them amongst each other? And so that's the exercise that we do every day as genealogists, is trying to kind of analyze and prioritize that sets of information. Yes. So like, I was born on November 23rd. In 20 years, somebody might say, oh no, he was born on November 24th. Well, if a baptismal record that was done 3 days after I was born says I was born on the 23rd of November, that is more likely to be correct than the person 20 years later saying, no, it was definitely the 24th. But yeah.
Somebody's senile grandmother that told a wrong date to somebody, and they transcribed it into a book, and because and there's lots of that stuff. Like, even people couldn't read and write. I was looking through census, and I was realizing that names get transcribed. They're just written like they sound. It might not, you know, so all kinds of things like that. It's so interesting.
You know, with the Cool family, it really came down to, well, we're not related to them because they're Protestant. And I was like, well, actually, you know, they were Protestant because that was the only church in the community. It wasn't that they were not Catholic. But then you go further back, and our Catholic Coolins are actually Anglicans. You know, people get really stuck on details, and you have to be a little bit more open-minded about how people lived in those periods of time, and what the circumstances were around what was happening. So
Yeah, I learned that actually this summer, just spending time at GANS and listening to the experienced people, is that they can look at the situation around that time frame and say, okay, well, like, I mean, these people did this because of this. Like, it wasn't because they wanted to or whatever. It's just, it was a survival thing, or like you said, that was the church that was there. So that's the church that they had to go to, because they certainly weren't going to not go to church.
No, yeah.
Not baptize their kids and stuff like that. So
well,
that's
a really good point. Actually, taking the time to understand what was happening in the area that your family was living at when you're researching will help you figure out why, for example, like, you know, why don't these church records exist? Well, if you do some research, you might find that the church burned down.
Yeah.
And then there's a gap. So you're like, okay, or I had this question, there was this question online the other day that I kind of waded into, which I try not to do. But
really all the time.
The question was, well, would my ancestor who died in 1898 received a death certificate? Well, that's actually a really complicated question because no, the province didn't issue death certificates, so no, they wouldn't have. But the follow-up question is would that death have been recorded? And the answer to that is no, because the province wasn't keeping death registrations at the time, except if you lived in Halifax. So knowing all of those things and then connecting it with where the person was living gives you the answer. Probably no, there's no record of that person dying. But you don't obviously know that coming in, so you end up having to make mistakes and looking for things that don't exist. And that's just trial and error.
Again, the benefit of being a member of an association, because you can ask that question, like, I can't find anything on so-and-so born in 1890. And then somebody like Peggy Chapman or you or somebody will say, well, that's because at that time that church burnt down, or there's no records, or they, you know, whatever. And so, yeah, so that's the real benefit. So, again, I'm Tressa Haney. This is Nathaniel Smith, and we're just talking. We're going to wrap this up very quickly, but I just wanted to say to people, say hi. Where are you from? Because we still want to know. If you have any questions, now's your chance, because we're going to wrap it up. So if you have anything you want to ask Nathaniel, please do. Becoming a member of GANS is a real benefit if you're into researching your family. You can go on the website, novascotiaancestors.ca, and go to join us or renew and go that way. Also, if you wanted to create a family file or something like that at GANS, that's also a great thing to do. You can email them at info@novascotiaancestors.ca. And they have a brick and mortar, 33 Octorlony Street in Dartmouth, Tuesday to Thursday, 9:30 to 3:30, and the odd Sunday. Check the website. Did I get that all out? I don't know the phone number. Sorry. So I got that all out. Yeah. So does anybody have anything to ask Nathaniel?
Yeah, I'm happy to take a question.
Take a question. Well, I'll let people post their questions if they have them while I talk about the event on October 23rd. This is to honor Terry Punch. Terry is a very prominent genealogist in Nova Scotia. And it's October 23rd at the Central Library, the nice, beautiful new library in Halifax, down on Spring Garden Road. And it's free. Many of their events are free, and becoming a member is a good thing, because the ones you have to pay for, you often get a discount for the workshops and stuff. So, yes, and Dr. Bruce Elliott, which was a person that researched with Terry, and I think they were close personal friends too. So he's going to do a talk about Terry. I'm disappointed that I'm not there to go to that.
I know. Actually, I deliberately don't look at the events pages on the GANS website because I get sad.
Although we are East Coasters at heart, we both I live in Ottawa and Nathaniel is in Edmonton. So yeah, we're kind of homesick for this Terry.
Homesick, yeah.
That's for sure. Well, thank you, everybody. There's no questions, so I guess you must have answered everything. Thanks to James for posting so many questions about the Sauls. If you need any help with research and you want to, so first of all, GANS is it's a resource library. So people don't research there for you, but you're more than welcome to go and search through all of their information. But there are people that are for hire, for researching, and Nathaniel has a list, and we're going to post that link in after when this gets shared onto Facebook. So if you can contact anybody off that list that you want and see if they can help you. If you become a member, there's often members that have specialties in different areas. I learned that this year, is that, you know, there are people that specialize in different groups of people, like the planters or the loyalists or that kind of thing.
African Nova Scotians. My case, it's prospect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're the resident expert on prospect.
Yep.
Yeah. So in terms of that, being a member at GANS could, you know, you can connect with other members, so that can be a more robust research.
Their website also has a large collection of index resources and all kinds of you know, transcribed records that are super useful. Like their cemetery collection, they have all of Holy Cross. Sorry, not Holy Cross. Geez, I'm just totally drawing a blank on the one on Roby Street there. Not Camp Hill. Oh, anyway.
Don't ask me.
I'm going to all the cemeteries in my brain. But
cemeteries are on the street.
Yeah. So yeah, anyway, it's a super important resource, and for members that are away, it's a good way to connect with people.
Yeah, and if you do come to Halifax and you want to stop in to GANS to do some research and you're from away, please email them or call them and let them know you're coming, because they'll give you a head start. They'll pull some things off the shelves for you. So, but they need some time to do that because it's all volunteer based. So Sherry asks, how far back in the Coolins and Christians did you get?
Well, I'm going to be a little mysterious and probably not answer that
question. You have to buy the book.
I will say this though, a lot of people are buying DNA tests because of what you said earlier about you know, finding, you know, am I 35% Irish and stuff like that. DNA is super powerful for other things, and what it has allowed us to do is find out a lot more about who families are connected to and where they come from geographically. And so a lot of the research that I've been doing has been on the genetic relationships between the various families in Prospect. So so I'm hoping to be able to explain to people in the piece that I'm working on right now how all of the Coolins are genetically related, and some of the interesting things that come out of that type of research. So to answer your question, Sherry, thousands and thousands of years ago. I know, I'm really...
in the time of Jesus, that kind of long?
That's
right. He's a relative. I don't know.
Yeah, he might
like a DNA test, or no, you probably have enough Coolins that are DNA tested.
No.
So yeah, also I just want to, Peggy Chapman, who's with GANS, she's on the board of directors. She's going to be doing a couple of workshops this fall. Check the website. If you're in the Halifax Dartmouth area, they'll be at GANS, and it's on DNA, and it's how to read the DNA, and it's more than just plugging it into the website and seeing who pops up. So she'll give you how to use that DNA in your research, actually.
Yeah, and I know Peggy personally has found some really interesting things in her DNA, and you know, not like surprises or anything, but in terms of like where her families come from and whatnot. So yeah, those should be really, really interesting lectures.
Yeah. So, all right, Nat, I think that's it. Well, thanks for everybody for watching. Please share this on your Facebook page. Call GANS, go on novascotiaancestors.ca, look at all their information, become a member. And thanks very much, Nat. We should do this again. If anybody wants to see this again, we'll get some questions together. We'll do a Q&A maybe. And yeah, and we'll check in with your research and how your book's coming.
Great, thanks.
All right, sounds good. Bye.